You dump the notebook in a museum display case, small, blue-edged, worn pages pressed behind glass. Most people walk right past it. But something about those faded pencil markings catches your eye. This isn't just another artifact from World War II. This is a direct message from someone who survived something most people can't even imagine: the Siege of Leningrad. 900 days where an entire city was trapped, cut off, starving, freezing. And this notebook, it tells the real story that history books gloss over. Your eyes drift across the glass. The handwriting is tight, controlled, like someone rationing every single pencil mark the same way they'd ration their last crumbs of bread, which, as it turns out, is exactly what happened. The siege started in September 1941. German forces surrounded Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, blocking every single supply route. No food coming in, no one getting out. Over 1 million civilians trapped inside a city, becoming a slow-motion death trap. The woman who wrote this notebook, her name was Anna Nikolaevna Zarova, was 24 years old when the blockade began. A teacher, single, living with her elderly parents in a small apartment near the city center. Her first entries are almost mundane, daily life continuing, even as the world around her starts to collapse. Notes about work, small observations about neighbors, complaints about the increasingly empty streets. But then something shifts. You can see it in the handwriting. The pencil marks become sharper, more desperate. The spaces between words get smaller, like she's trying to conserve paper the same way people were desperately trying to conserve food. By December, temperatures had dropped to -40 degrees. The city's water pipes froze. No electricity, no heating. People started burning furniture, books, anything that might generate a spark of warmth. Anna's notebook reveals something most history books skip: how people actually survived day to day. Not grand heroic moments, just brutal, grinding survival. She writes about boiling leather belts to make a kind of terrible soup, about watching neighbors slowly disappear, about the sound of children crying from constant hunger, raw, unfiltered. No propaganda, just survival. The bread rations were microscopic, 125 grams per day, about half a standard slice, for an entire day, and that was if you were lucky enough to get to the breadline before supplies ran out. People were dying faster than they could be buried. The ground was frozen solid. Mass graves became the only practical solution. Anna describes walking past bodies in the street, like they were just another part of the landscape. No emotion, just fact. By January 1942, over 100,000 people had already died, not from bombs, not from combat, from hunger, from cold, from a slow grinding destruction that most people can't even comprehend. Anna's notebook doesn't romanticize anything. She's not a hero, she's just surviving, watching her world systematically dismantled, page by careful page. And yet, there's something remarkable in her writing. A kind of stubborn hope. Small moments of human connection that refuse to be crushed. Want to know what happens next? A diary entry from mid-January reveals something extraordinary. Despite everything collapsing around her, Anna starts documenting small acts of human kindness. A neighbor sharing a single potato, a stranger helping an elderly woman carry water, tiny fragments of humanity preserved in the midst of absolute darkness. Her writing becomes a kind of resistance, not with weapons but with memory, with witnessing. She writes about a group of musicians in the Leningrad radio orchestra who continue rehearsing even as their colleagues are literally dying around them. Some musicians play until they physically cannot anymore. One violinist reportedly collapses mid-performance, is dragged away, and is replaced by another musician who continues the same musical phrase. This wasn't just performance, this was defiance. The musicians understood something profound, that culture itself was a form of survival, that by maintaining beauty, by refusing to let art die, they were pushing back against the Nazi siege in the most powerful way possible. Anna describes watching a radio broadcast where musicians play Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony, a piece that would later become a symbol of Leningrad's resistance. The music echoes through nearly empty streets, through frozen windows, through a city that seems more ghost than living space. Her descriptions are clinical but deeply emotional. She doesn't dramatically describe her feelings. Instead, she records precise details that reveal everything. The way bread lines form, how people move, who helps whom. The microscopic economies of survival that emerge when normal society breaks down. People start trading anything for food. A wedding ring, a family photograph. Personal artifacts become currency. Survival strips away sentimentality, revealing something both brutal and beautiful about human nature. Anna documents how families reorganize, how traditional structures collapse. Older generations sacrifice themselves so younger ones might survive. Children become caretakers. Strangers become makeshift families. One particularly haunting entry describes how some parents would deliberately reduce their own food intake, secretly passing their meager rations to their children. Not as a grand gesture, just as a quiet, unremarkable act of love. The siege continues. Months pass. Each day becomes a battle against mathematical probability. By February, the death toll has climbed to over 200,000. The city looks less like a human settlement and more like a vast frozen graveyard. Streets are lined with skeletal buildings, abandoned vehicles, occasional movements of desperate figures. Yet Anna keeps writing. Her notebook becomes more than a personal document. It's a form of testimony, a refusal to let this experience be forgotten or simplified into dry historical statistics. She understands something profound, that survival isn't just about physical endurance. It's about maintaining your humanity, about refusing to be completely broken. Her entries start including more philosophical observations, not academic pontifications, but raw, lived insights about human resilience, about the strange calculations people make when confronted with absolute scarcity. Who helps whom? Who survives? What determines human solidarity when everything seems hopeless? Anna observes that kindness becomes both more rare and more precious during extreme circumstances. A shared cup of water, a moment of genuine human connection, these become more valuable than gold. Her writing style shifts, less detailed chronology, more impressionistic, like she's capturing emotional textures rather than just events. Some entries are just fragments, a sentence, a half-completed thought, the pencil marks growing fainter, the paper more worn, but always, that sense of stubborn, unbreakable human spirit pushing through. Want to know how her story continues? Yes, her story continues through impossible odds. By late spring, Anna weighs barely 40 kilograms. Her body is failing, but her mind remains sharp enough to understand that her notebook might be her most important legacy. The siege enters its most brutal phase. Food becomes a mythical concept. Families dissolve. Neighborhoods become graveyards. Yet Anna continues documenting, her pencil moving across pages with a kind of desperate poetry. She writes about watching children, those who remain, playing in bombed-out courtyards. Their games are different now. Less about imagination, more about survival. They move like tiny adults, calculating, watching, understanding hunger in ways no child should. Her owl entries become more fragmented, shorter, more intense. Today I saw a woman share her last bread crust with a stranger's child, not out of heroism, simply because that's what humans do. The city breathes differently now, not with lungs, but with some deeper, more ancient mechanism of endurance. In June, Soviet forces begin breaking through German lines. Relief becomes possible. Possible matters but not certain. Anna's last full entry describes a moment of unexpected beauty. A small group of musicians, survivors themselves, playing a fragment of a Tchaikovsky piece in a half-destroyed apartment. The music sounds broken, incomplete, but unmistakably alive. Then her entries stop. Historical records reveal her fate months later. She survived the siege, but barely. Weakened by malnutrition, she would spend years recovering. Her notebook method, that extraordinary document of human resilience, survived with her. Decades after the war, scholars would study her writings, not just as a historical artifact, but as a profound meditation on human survival. on what happens when civilization's thin veneer gets stripped away. Anna never considered herself a hero. She was simply a witness, a recorder of moments most would prefer to forget. Her writings revealed something more complex than heroism, the mundane, extraordinary ways humans maintain dignity under impossible circumstances. Her notebook became a testament, not to grand political narratives, but to individual moments of grace. Small acts of kindness performed when everything suggests kindness is impossible. She died in 1985, having lived a quiet life after the war, teaching, writing occasional essays, maintaining that same precise unsentimental gaze that had sustained her through Leningrad's darkest days. Her daughter would later donate the original notebook to a museum, but copies circulated. Translations emerged. Her words traveled further than she could have imagined. Anna's story wasn't about survival. It was about bearing witness, about recording human experience with unflinching clarity, about understanding that even in humanity's darkest moments something luminous remains, something unbreakable, something that refuses to be erased. Her legacy echoes through generations, not as a monument, not as a statue, but as a whispered testament to human resilience. Young historians dure her notebook. Students in St. Petersburg study her words. Her granddaughter, now elderly herself, occasionally gives lectures about her mother's experience. The pages of her notebook carry a subtle transformation. They are no longer just historical documents. They have become something more elemental, a map of human survival, a guide to understanding how ordinary people navigate extraordinary suffering. In archives and university libraries, her precise handwriting becomes a bridge between those who experienced the siege and those who can only imagine it. Her words create a connection across time, across generations, across the incomprehensible distance between war and peace. Cities change, monuments rise and fall, political boundaries shift like sand, but human dignity remains constant. Anna understood something profound, that witnessing is itself an act of resistance, that recording suffering prevents its total erasure. That memory is a form of survival. Her notebook travels, not just as a historical artifact, but as a living document, a reminder that humanity persists, that compassion exists even in our darkest moments. In quiet libraries and academic halls, scholars trace her words. They understand that her writing is more than a chronicle. It is a meditation, a philosophical exploration of human endurance. The city that nearly broke her, Petersburg Manufsa remembers, not with grand memorials, but with quiet understanding, with respect for those who survived, who witnessed, who remembered. Her story becomes part of a larger narrative, not just of war, but of human potential, of what we can endure, of what remains when everything else is stripped away. Fragments of her life persist, in academic papers, in family stories, in the collective memory of a city that survived the impossible. Anna's notebook sits now in a climate-controlled archive, its pages fragile, its words eternal, a testament to human resilience, to the power of bearing witness, to the unbreakable spirit that refuses to be silenced. Her legacy becomes a quiet revolution, a gentle reminder that strength is not always loud, not always visible. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it simply endures. In the soft light of archival rooms, her notebook breathes, each page a silent testimony, each word a defiance against forgetting. The city around her transforms. Buildings rise where rubble once lay. Generations pass who never knew the siege, who cannot comprehend its brutal mathematics, its cold calculus of survival. Yet her words remain, unchanged, undiminished. Young researchers touch the fragile paper. They feel something beyond ink and memory. A pulse, a heartbeat of human experience. Her daughter now gone, her granddaughter aging, but the story continues, passed like a delicate flame, from hand to hand, from heart to heart. In universities and quiet study rooms, students pause. They read her precise script. They understand something profound about resilience, about what it means to be human. The notebook is not a monument, not a museum piece. It is a living document, a conversation across time. Anna's precise, unadorned words speak of something universal, beyond war, beyond suffering, a fundamental human capacity to witness, to remember, to survive. Her story becomes universal, not just Russian, not just historical, but fundamentally deeply human. In the soft archive light, her notebook waits, breathing, remembering, testifying.